Welcome, smart humans, to Waves of Wisdom, Summer Conversations with Smart Minds. Because this summer, I invite you on an inspiring and transformative journey as I explore the minds and lives of extraordinary smart humans. I'm, of course, your host of the Managing the Smart Mind podcast, Elsa Kramer, also known as Coach Kramer. And throughout this scintillating summer series, we're going to be riding the waves of the inspiring lives of lots of very different people with bright brains. In each interview, I have the privilege of engaging in captivating conversations with amazing smart humans, from poets to startup founders, from artists to entrepreneurs, and from stand-up comedians to swamis. This summer, we'll be delving into the depths of their wisdom, and we're going to draw lots of inspiration from their unique perspectives, their choices, and experiences. Waves of Wisdom is not just about high IQ or being fast-brained. It's about how to harness your intelligence and your heart to make a meaningful impact. You're going to learn about strategies, tools, and shifts these smart minds have employed to navigate the complexity of being a fast-brained human on this crazy planet. We're going to explore all the ways in which you too can design a life that works with your smart mind. Whether you have a well or not so well managed smart mind, this summer series of Waves of Wisdom will help guide you on your quest for knowledge, inspiration, and personal growth. Enjoy. This is episode 88, Chasing Dreams Across Borders with Ashley Duque Kienzle. Hello, listener. I love meeting smart humans who are as interested in emotions as I am. So it was such a joy to interview Ashley on emotional and physical and mental well-being, and also on AI, the startup scene, living in Barcelona, and much, much more. Now, Ashley is an experienced strategy and product leader who has delivered artificial intelligence products at companies such as Amazon, Facebook, and helped shape technology strategy at Capital One and American Express. She is currently building her own startup, and she has a BA in Behavioural Biology and an MA in Communications focused on behaviour change, also useful, from Johns Hopkins. And she's obsessed not just with health, but also with making generative AI much more inclusive. Now, during our talk, we cover a very, very broad array of topics, including her reading habits, where we geek out on a book on emotions we both love. We talk about the importance of embodiment and bodily sensations. We talk about her daily routine for mental and physical health, the challenges and experiences of living in and working in different cities and countries, her reflections on the biases and the barriers in tech and the startup scene, and her concerns about AI, social media, and the deep need for more diverse voices there. And at the end, Ashley actually extends an invitation to anyone who wants to work on making generative AI more inclusive. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this whirlwind journey through the world of health, emotions, tech, and much more. So welcome, Ashley Duque. And we agreed I was going to pronounce your last name the German way, Kienzle, I think.
Yeah.
But any Germans listening, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
And we're going to use the card method again that I've been using for a lot of podcast episodes recently to keep it sort of, kind of hopefully magical, engaging. And I want to start with boredom. Let's dive right in. How do you stop yourself from being bored, or how do you get on board? What do you do?
Ooh, good question. So I read a ton. I'm a vociferous reader. So I would say if I'm bored in conversations, I tend to have a I'm trying to get better about this because I tend to jump in because my brain is often 10
Ahead of the game.
ahead of where we are.
Yep.
And I'm trying to get better at this. So I would say that's one way that I remove myself from boredom, or I change the topic. And then, yeah, I read a lot just to make sure, because I love learning. I think it also obviously deepens conversations when you have other things to be able to draw from, helps with problem solving, all that. So I'm constantly reading. And then also my legs are kind of always moving. So it's a mix of like the ADHD with restless leg syndrome, which who knows, like those are probably interrelated.
Yes.
In some way. 100%. So I think that's also like I keep my brain going by also moving all the time.
I love it. And probably your legs are also saying, listen, take me somewhere exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Go.
Move. Exactly.
Let's go. Which is fun because my next card is embodiment.
Ooh.
Because a lot of us, like fast-brained humans, sometimes tend to live too much in our brains, right? Which is a very fun place to be. I'm not going to deny it, but we also have this exciting, but some people call it like the flesh sack. I think that's so depressing. The human meat sack. I think I've heard. Like, let's call it whatever you want to call it. You don't need to call it your temple, but it's a pretty exciting interface. Let's call it an interface, right?
It's a fun interface. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of, well, kind of towards the end of reading How Emotions Are Made, which,
oh my God,
so amazing, right?
I am doing an entire month on that in Shamelessly Smart. I'm actually teaching on it this month.
Oh, you have to.
It's smiley behind me.
I'm obsessed. And it's actually quite sorry.
Oh, hang on. I'm going to pause you because we both know what we're talking about. Lisa Feldman Barrett wrote this book. You totally want to check it out. And also maybe start with 7.5 lessons. I think it's on the brain, which is slightly more accessible.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So, okay, I promise I'll come back to
the body, go for it.
But I have a tendency to like bring all these things together. So, so I have interns, and every cohort of interns, let's say, I read and I make them read with me a book based in science that has some tangential relevance to my company. But it's always like neuroscience, behavior change, health, a lot of these things, so I studied behavioral biology and then did my master's in behavior change. And I've really always been super passionate about how we're interconnected, right? So how the body, the brain, the intellect, the emotion, all of these different systems, including how we relate to one another, are interconnected. And that's why I chose behavioral biology, because it was neuroscience, physics, but also anthropology, sociology. How do all these pieces come together to impact health? And so that's part of the basis of the company, but also just something I've been super passionate about for ages. And so I give them like a selection of a couple, different books, and they all chose How Emotions Are Made. I don't think they fully understood how science-based it was.
And how thick.
Yes. And so we get together in person. It's actually this afternoon, this week. And we discuss 1 or 2 chapters, depending on how much we've read. And we discuss like, I want them to really get into it, because I don't want to sit there just explaining or saying, my perspective. And it's really a way that I found to help them learn critical thinking, which we can get to another topic later on that I think is really a dying skill, unfortunately. So anyway, we get together and then we discuss like what was interesting, what was confusing, and then how could we apply what we learned to this to the product and or to our lives, right? And so one of the things that I've believed and really was touting, to who anyone would listen, when I was even in undergrad, was the obvious connection I saw to continual like lack of nutrients, lack of movement, and trauma. So let's call trauma as in living in poverty, living in a place where there's constant, gunshots or fear,
violence,
parents yelling, exactly. And how that clearly would be tied to future addictions and problems. Like I really don't think it takes a genius to figure that out, but alas. And so this was so great, because we were reading the emotions and illness chapter this week, and she really validates that. Both with science, but also, with her new constructs. And so I think one of the coming back to the question around embodiment, one of the things that this has really helped me is not only validating kind of what I knew was true and the obvious, like we need, nutrients that are healthy for our brains or our bodies. We need to move, all these different things to help keep us in quote unquote equilibrium. And one of the things that even more so she's reinforced for me is how I can take those sensations, especially as a woman, because I do think, when we're going through, and she mentions this as well, like during both our periods as well as menopause and all those things, that oftentimes there's bodily sensations that we don't know how to categorize.
Yeah.
And so being attuned, which also means living in the moment, which is something I'm really also trying to do a lot more of, because we are so heady, and trying to kind of pull myself out of that like pontification that I love so much. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but to be able to really come back to, okay, if I'm suddenly, okay, for instance, here at San Juan, there's fireworks, petardos, they call them. Barcelona is obsessed with petardos. I don't know what it is for fireworks. I don't know what it is. Today happens to be the 4th of July. And that's the only time I really remember hearing them other than New Year's Eve in America. But here it's like all the time. And so my dogs have massive responses. And I found myself the other night having a response. I was starting to feel, because they're going off at like 11 p.m. and I'm normally in bed by 9:45, starting to feel my body respond.
Yeah.
And
Being
I was
triggered.
able to say, Ashley, this is not a stress response. This is purely your body responding to large, because I didn't grow up, thank God, with yelling, screaming in my household. It was very, very calm. And I've always had really sensitive ears. So that puts me on alert. So I'm able to say, okay, I'm feeling this body sensation. This is not anxiety. This is not stress. This is just a response.
It's a normal physical or physiological response. Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
And so I think I'm becoming more and more attuned, especially as I get older and become aware that like, okay, let me capture that, if you will, similar to what I've done to really change my brain to be more positive focused on like my own self thoughts. Similar with these responses, like, okay, let's capture those and say, nope, this is a natural response, but let's channel it this way, or let's do whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So embodiment, I'm trying to be present without allowing it to really to react.
Yeah, right. Which is the beautiful thing. So if you have an emotion and you can actually just witness it instead of getting caught up in it, I think that is kind of that gap. We need to really help people become aware that that is where your power lies. Not always, but in most situations. Yeah,
exactly.
So any other, because I mean, listen, you look like you work out a lot, right? Well, so is that also something you do to stay more embodied, or is that for another reason?
Definitely. I think one of the things, so like jump a bit to my history. So my dad was sick when I was my dad was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, when I was 6. And then he was sick until I was 12. And he was amazing. Like I can't say enough positive things about him. So ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a neurodegenerative disease. Yeah. So your neurons and your muscles stop communicating, so your muscles atrophy.
Yeah.
And so basically your brain stays as cognitively alert and, highly functioning as it was previously, but your muscles and your body deteriorates. So as you can imagine, for the person, I mean, I haven't experienced it, but it can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Can be also, sadly, people make judgments.
Yeah.
I mean, sadly, people make judgments.
Yes. Full stop, right?
About you that you are intellectually,
they assume.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I can remember people talking to my dad, like very slowly and loudly. Because, and again, I mean, it is what it is. It's what they were exposed to, right? And just kind of being like, he could still like, fully functioning in his brain. But he never, I don't ever remember him complaining. He cried, of course. He was very like connected to his sensitivity, but that really brought to my attention the importance of health. And so this is something that's 10% of it is familial, but there's nothing that they know of. It's not like he was a smoker or a drinker, neither actually. He was very healthy, ate healthily, grew up on a farm, blah, blah, blah. So it's something that put into my mind just the importance of staying healthy to prevent being sick, right? Even though there was nothing he could do. And then I also was, for a lot of reasons, but some of it probably because of not knowing how to deal with how my body felt and emotions and stuff, and dealing with the trauma, was bulimic when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I learned through that process, aside from changing the way, literally changing my thought patterns, which is, I think is incredibly important, and through my faith and a lot of other things, but also what my body needs to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And so again, because I'm incredibly like hyper, my brain's always going, it's like I'm very active already. If I don't feed it frequently, literally give myself nutrients frequently, like when I put it into a state where I'm hungry, it's just not a good state for me. So I learned I needed to be like eating frequently. I learned I needed to be exercising to keep, my brain healthy, to keep those endorphins, to keep those various pieces. And I've recently learned that I just really can't do alcohol.
Right.
So a lot of those things, because the big portion, because of the ADHD and also just the dopamigenic and all those things.
Yep.
So I've learned, I think, and it goes back to that embodiment, right? Like, what do I need to be at my optimal, and what do I need to both cognitively, but also emotionally, physically, etc. And so I learned pretty young, I'd say, when I was in my 20s, that like this is something I have to do to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean I don't fall into times when I don't want to, or when it's
sure, you're human, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I just know for me to be on my best game, yeah, I have to. So, but I also learned I can't make it a perfection thing. It's not about having to do it every day a week. It's not about having to look this way. It's not about blah, blah, blah. It's about what's healthy for me and the right kind of boundaries, if you will, around that.
I love that. Do you have any rituals, for example, when you get up in the morning or that kind of stuff?
I have my like, what is it, aromas that flow through. I have one of those ones that goes off, the diffuser that goes off.
Listen, I talk a lot about this on the podcast. I have like different types of perfume to like set my state. Like, so for this podcast, I am wearing grapefruit and like super citrusy. Yeah.
I love it.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have that. And then I always have quiet time first thing in the morning with the dog. So I make my matcha. I have my lemon and ginger water, like just soaking in that overnight or whatever. Actually, I have a little remnants of it here.
Nice.
Little citrus zing. I make my matcha, and then I have like quiet time, prayer, journaling, and then I go for a walk with the dogs.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. So again, to try to calm, because obviously like cortisol is going first thing in the morning. There's like all kinds of brain stuff happening, to really like set the intention for the day, if you will. And then so prayer and journaling really helps me.
And get moving, right? Like I always say, and my husband now agrees, like I need to be walked in the morning.
Yeah, definitely. Dogs help with that. Adopted dog. I just
actually it's energy.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you just I do become like a dog, I think, which is, being kept indoors for too long, and I start chewing at things, which is not what we want.
No, definitely. And it's so, I mean, there's so many studies that show like getting the natural light in the morning.
Yes. Oh my God.
Through clouds, and like moving in the morning, delaying slightly your caffeine intake, like all of those things. I'm a huge fan of Andrew Huberman's as well. So.
Yeah. Same, right? And I think a lot of listeners to this podcast will be like, oh, Huberman, yeah. Daylight, here I come.
He speaks the language.
100%. Okay, so tell me, how did you end up in Barcelona? Because you are now in Barcelona. You are not from Barcelona originally. So what happened there? What's the story?
As you may tell by the accent. So I like to say I'm a calculated risk taker.
Interesting.
This is the 16th city I've lived in. And
wow,
it is, yes. And actually it's so I'm just coming up on 3 years, which is actually the longest I've been in a city, probably since New York, but even New York was like just coming up on 3 years. So anyway.
So that's also how you stop from getting bored, I guess. Like you just keep moving.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
And like, obviously you meet new people every time
Yes.
you go to a new city and like new job. I've also had lots of jobs.
Yeah, listen,
And
there's no shame in that. Like, everybody on this podcast has had a ton of
yeah,
jobs and careers
I mean,
and
I
all
like
the
to
things.
say that gives me perspective and I can, then make
Yeah.
connections across the strategy side of things. But so I lived in Salamanca, which is like northwest of Madrid when I like literally 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right now. I turned 21 in Salamanca and I'm turning 41 in what day is it today? 16 days. So anyway, I lived here and I loved Spain. Absolutely loved Spain. Love the culture, love the juxtaposition to the American pace of life and all of those other things and values, etc. And so decided, I'm not sure it was quite consciously, but maybe consciously, that I wanted to live in Europe again. Or wanted to live outside of the US, and like definitely. And so I didn't, so my dad's grandmother was an orphan and we believe she was from Colombia, like Bogota region. We don't know exactly because she was an orphan in New York, but she was an orphan like a bit later, like 6 or something like that. Anyway, so there's something, I like to think there's something in my blood that has like the Spanish, the Latin, whatever,
Latina.
fiery.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I just, although obviously South America is different than Spain, don't get me wrong, but I love the language. I didn't grow up speaking Spanish. Sadly, my grandfather told my grandmother to pretend she was French because of biases. So Duque, my last name, is actually both French and Spanish. It means the same thing, Duque. So anyway, I just really, really loved the culture. And so I tried a couple times to come to Europe or to go to South America, but because I didn't grow up with a lot of money, I had to start paying back. I had like a full academic scholarship, but I had to pay for like how I like living expenses or whatever, right? For university. So I had to start, sadly in the States, university's insane.
It's mad. Yeah, totally.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But anyway, that's a
different topic for a different day.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So I had to start paying back my loans right away. So I needed to be working and like blah, blah, blah. So that I didn't have the same option to just kind of like pick up and go and figure something out and, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to build a career. So the only way really for me to get abroad, at least within my mind space at that time, was to find a job to move me there. And so there being Europe, it's quite challenging to get a visa until you're specialized. And so as special as I believed I was at every age of my life, at 22 and 25 and even 30, it was really hard to get a visa until I actually specialized in artificial intelligence. And then at that point, it was a specialized skill, but still, a lot of the countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, even South America, where I was working, weren't sponsoring visas. And AI was really just starting to proliferate into some of those countries. I would say, with obviously ChatGPT and the LLMs, it's becoming even more of a key player, if you will. But so I moved to London now it's about 5.5 years ago or so, because that was where I got the offer for and the visa and like the moving, etc. And so I had an offer in Amsterdam, London, and like an option in Beijing, but ended up going to London because of just felt like it was the right place.
It's like a jumping off board as well for the rest of Europe, I guess.
Yeah. And because they actually I mean, I know people are going to argue with me about this, but London, as far as AI, was a bit ahead of a lot of the other cities and countries in Europe. So it was a place where there were big companies doing AI. They had some headquarters and they could, they wanted people who had experience in AI. So yeah.
And then how did you escape to Barcelona?
Yeah. So I was there for 2.5 years and I actually thought I was going to stay longer, but probably because of a biased system, heaven forbid. But I ended up just kind of deciding, okay, this is like pretty clear that London is not where I need to be, and not what I felt like God was calling me to. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna move to Barcelona.
Just like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew I wanted more sun, because I like vitamin D is heavily important to me. And I wanted the culture more of the Mediterranean. I wanted something that was a bit more different from the United
Right.
States, and the UK still has a fair amount of similarities.
Yeah, it's Anglo-Saxon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, language, also the pace and kind of the value system,
Yeah.
from my perspective, what I've experienced. And so I had actually never been to Barcelona before I decided I was going to move here. And my mom
Again,
was
keep it
like,
exciting.
I know exactly. It's my mom's favorite city. And actually, ironically, I'm sitting in my parents' flat right now because
Huh.
they're in the US. They live 3 floors above me. So yeah,
Interesting dynamic.
part of my mom is Dutch, so that's why we have this little Dutch doll over here.
Wow. For the
And so
listener, she's pointing to a woman in
oh yeah, sorry.
what is the word in English? Like I know what it is in Dutch, but she's like all dolled up in traditional Dutch.
Exactly. She's
Um,
got her little Dutch shoes, the wooden
lace, cap, all the
cap.
things. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, so I just was like, okay, I'm gonna move. And then I was really blessed. I was interview like in the negotiating an offer from Changing Health, which is actually a UK company out of Newcastle. And I was like, guys, love the company, really feel like this is a great fit. You know, they love me. And I said, but not doing it from Newcastle. No, nothing against Newcastle, just wasn't the right sunshine for me.
The sunshine in Newcastle, yeah, it leaves a bit
Yeah.
to be desired, I think.
Yes. And I'm a big city person.
Yeah.
I love big cities. Hence, you know, also with the boredom and keeping things going, etc.
Exactly.
So I was like, would love to join the company. Actually, did you know talent? There's a lot of great tech and AI talent in Barcelona, and it's less expensive than the UK. And so they were like, and
So
that's
basically you sold them on Barcelona.
yeah.
Yeah, good for you. So tell me, speaking of tech, right? Like let's jump straight into the startup scene. Like, what
Woo.
is it like being in there? First of all, what because you
Oh,
spoke earlier, like I feel a bit like an outsider sometimes.
yeah, yeah. I think, man, it's an interesting one. Man, literally, that's
Yeah.
like what it is.
That's a whole topic. And so I also have a
Yeah.
card with feminism, so we can combine the two,
Okay.
maybe.
Yes. I think so so I started my own company about a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
I've
Tell
been
us what it's in, right while you're at it. What are you
oh
building?
yeah. So it's called Elm Health. It's helping people make healthier choices for themselves and the environment.
Mhm.
App. Just finishing up the back end. We're actually working on fine tuning / using embeddings for an LLM, which is why it's like been delayed slightly.
Mhm.
But it uses AI to help people choose healthier for themselves and then also for the environment, starting with restaurants.
Love it.
So like I mentioned before, I'm super passionate about our health, but I'm also really passionate about the environment's health and behavior change, hence the, master's focused on behavior change. And so I started my own company a year and a half ago, but I've been in the tech sector, gosh, I mean, really since I graduated from university. So, close to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I worked at big, so Amazon, Facebook / Meta, Capital One, Accenture, blah, blah, blah. I've worked at Scale Up, Babylon Health. I've worked at more startup phase, Vintra, they're in the computer vision space, as well as Changing Health. But I'd never started my own thing, and I knew I wanted to start my own thing. And so I dabble, I've worked with VCs, I've presented to boards, blah, 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 all that.
Yeah. Right. You know how the game is played, basically. You know the rules, so on and so forth.
Yes, but I thought it was going to be different. I don't know why. I'm just an optimist at heart, and I just don't understand why people don't look at the facts. So
as a behavioral scientist,
yeah, I know.
Just saying.
I know. I understand it.
Yeah.
Like obviously, I understand biases. I understand how they work,
sure.
etc. But for some reason, I thought, okay, people in this area
They
obviously
can see beyond their biases.
exactly, or at least they're trying to work on them for the
Yeah,
love of God.
that'd be fun.
Yeah, geez, heaven forbid. And again, we all have biases. We don't need to be ashamed that we have biases. We need to be ashamed if we don't look at them and address them. Don't be ashamed of your bias. They all exist. We all do. We
Yep.
can try to pretend that we don't have them, and then we are lying to ourselves and everyone else. So I think I had hoped, right, that things were different, that someone who has 2 degrees from Johns Hopkins and who's worked in AI for the last 10 years and who has clearly proven they know how to build teams and deploy products and blah, 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 wouldn't need to prove themselves again. Because quite honestly, I'm 41. I'm pretty sick of proving myself.
Yeah.
But that just wasn't the case. And there's a lot of barriers against all different types of people. It's not just women, but not having the right connections, not having just income or a livelihood that you can sit around on, and build and take the risk, not having a partner or extended family or whatever who can bear that risk if you
and give you the garage, right, to build it from.
Exactly.
Essential ingredient.
Exactly.
Origin story. Yeah.
Exactly. So I learned a ton, got pretty frustrated in the process, and ultimately decided, okay, I'm just going to have to live on my savings, and build it myself, because especially with about a year ago when the markets really switched, etc.
Yeah.
That was really the only way, as a female in particular, but someone who hasn't built their own company previously, who isn't a white male engineer. I'm not saying all white male engineers have it easy and that they get it too,
sure.
But there is an additional barrier.
Yep.
And quite honestly, being smarter than most of the people in the room, and sometimes
that too, right?
And sometimes being more attractive than them too.
Did you ever try during this time to reach out to female only founder?
So sadly, I've had not very great experiences with some of those too.
Interesting. Are you willing to talk about that? Is that something you?
Yeah, I think so. I see a very different, and again, I'm saying from my perspective and from a few other women who I know who've had similar perspectives. I do think that there's an age difference thing, because I think those who are a bit older than I am, had to fight really hard to get one seat at the table.
Yeah.
And so there was only one seat ever. I mean, I can actually remember at Amazon once, I had a woman tell me I wasn't allowed to sit at the table. I had to sit behind. She wasn't the only, she also told me I wasn't allowed to wear heels because she didn't want me to be taller than her.
People are so fascinating.
Yeah. Anyway, so she was, interestingly enough, in that age bracket. I think, and she was from this was in America when I was there, but she was from a different country. She was an engineer. She'd fought, right?
Yeah.
She had fought to be at the table. She was a director level. I'm not just diminishing her fight at all, or the crap that she went through at all. And I'm trying to empathize with her reasoning of why she's responding and the reasoning of why some of these women responded the way that they did. Because there was it was a competition always, right? It was and not all women in this bracket are the way. There's a woman named Zoe who's at a VC who's amazing and just so inclusive and so willing to help. So but to have a bias or a stereotype, I think there's a lot of the kind of scarcity mindset, sadly, that even if we don't want to have it, our biases, again, still exist. And so there's also a thing where I've never been married. I don't have children. I look younger than I am. There's also a bias to that. So I've actually had more success with more of the women who are a bit younger and who are in the area who haven't come up, I think, as much against that. They've come up with their own issues. Don't get me wrong. We all come up our own, but who haven't had as much of the, I can only be this. And the reality is there are women VCs, which is amazing, but women still get 1.9% of investment.
I know. It's
And
insane.
so I can't tell you how many men have said to me, oh, but it's easier for you. It's easier for you because there's women only funds and there's a requirement of women to be on boards.
Have you
Excuse
seen
me.
the data, honey? Yeah.
That's what I get.
Yep.
I will, because it's not my opinion. You
Yeah.
can argue with me all you want. At the end of the day, I know I'm right because I'm looking at the data. I didn't create this data. The data, it says, actually last year it went down the percentage that women get. And it's not because less women are funding startups. That doesn't actually, create the distance. But anyway, so
What would you change if you could change one thing in the startup scene?
capitalism.
Okay. How would you change it?
um, so I think a few players like power in general have too much power and not enough knowledge. And we being the system
Mm-hmm.
expects, if you will, them to not be using biases on their own to make decisions, expects them to have knowledge in an abundance of spaces where they just can't possibly.
Mm-hmm.
And then to make decisions that are not based on archaic patterns, but based on actual data and patterns and like understanding how someone can speak in a way that might be different, or who has a different background, or who looks different,
Yeah,
who has
or is
different
neurodivergent,
wisdom.
or yeah.
Exactly. All of those things that don't fit the pattern, but the pattern is relatively small, right? So VC investment is not this like long, it hasn't been around for hundreds of years,
No,
right?
no.
It is
It's relatively new.
advent. Exactly. Relatively
Yes.
new. It's even more new in Europe than it is in the US. And so, people are making decisions based on startups that have really not existed for all that long. I mean, yes, small businesses, of course, that have been around for ages and ages. But they're based on, and then subsequently, what are the things we see in the media? We see white male engineers who are heterosexual and who, behave in a way that we understand, for lack of a
Yeah,
better
that
term,
fits our
or
mental
try to
imagery,
understand.
right? So it sort of feels safe and we feel
Exactly.
familiar, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
American, and mostly American, by the way,
Yeah.
mostly Western.
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, if you look at the top, always makes me frustrated. But if you look at the people, even who are talking to Congress and talking to Parliament, they're talking to the leaders of these major tech firms that, guess what? The majority are American, of Indian descent. Like most of them live in the US, or, were educated in the US, or South African, right? In one particular instance. But we're asking a very, very small select few who don't have experiences of the world to kind of determine what the norms are and the patterns,
Yes.
etc. And that's
Yeah.
just not a reality.
So basically, you're saying you need a much wider sample. Like if we speak data language, you need a much wider sample. And you need to find lots of ways to get sort of to see your biases and then circumvent them. I would guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and understand the biases all the way from the inception, right? I mean, I think one of the things they say, like, oh, but look at the successes. And it's like, well, yeah, but the successes exist in the structure that
Yes, it's a
exists.
self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah,
It's so
like,
fascinating.
yeah, like, of course. Yeah. Just like we were going back to the how emotions are made book. Like when they say, like, oh, yeah, anybody can bootstrap themselves and come out of, poverty and history of slavery. Have you looked at the miles and miles that people are behind just from being born?
Yeah.
Like there's not an
It's
even
insane.
playing field. Yeah, you can't say apples and apples, oranges and oranges. It's just not. Yeah,
It's
it's
quite
not.
mad actually when you think about it. Like, and whenever I do have family members who have different opinions than I do, and then we have this discussion. They're like, yeah, but everybody has the same opportunities. I'm like, what? Say what? Come again? Can you can we rewind? And I think again, so many fast-brained humans get stuck somewhere in their career, whether it is they want to venture out on their own, start their own business, or they want to move up the ladder, because people do not understand their way of being and it feels unfamiliar, right? With ADHD, it would be like, oh my God, you're so restless. You're all over the place. Can I trust you? Yada, yada. If you're autistic, you're like, you're just socially inept. Basically, you're
Exactly.
no fun to be around. And if you're too smart overall, you're downright threatening. So there we
Exactly.
are. I mean,
Yeah.
the fun
And
bundle.
and I think when unfortunately the human mechanism, if you will, that
Yeah, we go to behavioral psychology perspective.
and what we do is protect, and we go around folks that we understand, that we don't feel
Yeah.
threatened by, that are like us, right? That's the way that we are. But I think, again, this goes back to, there is a responsibility, particularly on, I say on myself, but also on other people who have benefited
Yeah, on
from.
privileged groups, right?
Exactly,
I'm totally
exactly,
one of those as well. Yeah.
exactly. And like, to understand that and to work against behaving in that
Yeah.
way. And
And also
so,
in AI, of course, to get all that bias out of the models somehow. I mean, that is going to be massive. Do you think that's
yeah,
possible? What are your thoughts on that?
oh, golly. So this is a
Oh,
space where,
hang on. I'm just going to, because I
yeah, no,
sometimes
go
I
ahead.
just assume everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no worries, go.
Right. So, AI models are trained, right, on basically, especially LLMs, large language models, are trained on stuff that already exists, which means that it's trained on existing biases, which then get perpetuated in the model, sometimes amplified depending on what's going on, and depending on the sample and the people training the model. This is a massive
Exactly.
problem. Like, lots of engineers, lots of people, Google, have spoken out like about this, have subsequently also been fired or walked away. But it's a very hard problem to solve. So what are your thoughts on this?
Super hard. So it's interesting. I think I'm a big believer that, like, we all have a responsibility, kind of like I was saying, right? We all have
Yeah.
a responsibility. And I really feel like I have an interesting perspective because I've worked in AI. I grew up without a lot of resources, but two amazing parents, and like, I have the intellectual capacity and the time to dive into this. So I read so much about all of these various things to try to stay up to date on the new different trainings. I've worked across a variety of different AI models. So natural language processing, computer vision. So an LLM is based on neural networks, which using natural language processing, basically. So I've worked on neural networks. I've worked on a variety of graphs, all kinds of different AI. That's the not getting bored and jumping from job to job.
Yeah, totally.
And so I have an interesting kind of view, certainly not global, but a view of a variety of different spaces. I think my biggest concern around all of this is where it is actually driving us towards as a human race. And I believe a, a lot of that started with social media.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who don't fully know, social media uses artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So that's how your recommendations engines work. That's how your news feed is tailored for you. That's how your notifications, all of that is based on social media. And AI is normally optimized for something. So like,
Yeah.
what's the objective of the
Exactly.
model,
Yeah.
right?
Like, for
And
example,
so
like Facebook wants you
mhm,
on Facebook. That's
because
like,
it's where they spend money.
how can we get you on Facebook? How can we keep you on Facebook?
Exactly. Because again, capitalism and markets, and it's a company.
Yep. Got to make money.
Exactly. And they have pressure from shareholders, which, is a
Again,
lot of the
capitalism,
conflict.
right? Different podcast episode. Yeah. Let's burn it
Exactly.
all down.
So anyway, so I think I'm concerned about what these models are optimized to do.
Right.
And so when they are primarily, and there are open source models, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
when they are primarily driven by private companies that have a objective to grow, to quickly iterate,
Yes.
and they don't have the same objective to be sustainable. They don't have the same incentive
And
to make
transparent.
sure, exactly,
Yeah.
to make sure that everything that is going out there is not having a negative consequence. One of the things I put out recently to do and I'm going to do some posts on is like, what did we learn, or what should we have learned from social media and the rapid integration that it had in society, and the lack of foresight, preparedness, intervention,
Oversight.
exactly,
Yeah.
that happened in 20 years, by the way.
Oh.
What do we need to learn from that? Because so many people say, oh, it's like the printing press. It's not like the printing press. The printing press was a massive machine that weighed hundreds of pounds. You had to like create them with iron ore. You can run AI on your like little tiny, basically you are running AI on your phone, on edge computing.
All the time.
It does not need additional, other than, of course, the ability to run the models, train the models, etc., GPUs, etc. You can proliferate this technology in seconds. It doesn't require the construction of printing presses, right?
There's like zero barrier, right? The only barrier I think is like access to the internet and sort of electricity, and there needs to be some shit in the cloud happening.
Exactly. Well,
that's
and
pretty much it.
As long as you have the software on your phone, so your face recognition is running on your phone, right? It's called edge computing. So basically, my concern, so all of this stuff happened in literally a span of 20 years, and we can look at the negative consequences it's had, and we've only started to just brush the negative consequences that social media has had. We have to look at what happened there, and how do we make sure that right now we start doing something. Like, we should have started literally when social media started to think about how AI is going to impact.
Right? Like, I did a project way back when with the Dutch National Archives around like trusting images, and that you cannot trust what you see. And that was, I think it was 2016. I mean, right? And we're 2023, and it's like, it's just got so much worse.
But we're going, they talk about like, there's this whole like, what is it? Race to the bottom. Yeah. But we have to look again at human behavior. Like, we are inherently, I'm going to say lazy, and some people are
listen, it's just a hormonal thing, right? We talk dopamine, etc. We're wired for quick, like easy wins.
Exactly.
If we weren't, everybody would be super fit and healthy and accomplishing all their goals.
Exactly.
And they're not.
I mean, one of the big things for AI is like efficiency, optimization, right? Like, we're building businesses to try to do things faster with less effort, shorter, less money, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And of course, again, I'm not saying there aren't benefits that come from that.
Totally. Like, if you can find like drugs, for example, if you can design drugs in a much faster way, we love you to keep doing it, right? Find the cure for cancer. Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to AI at all. I've worked in it. I think there's so many amazing opportunities. I'm also understand that there are good things that came from more people having access to have a voice to media, social media connections.
100%, right? Like, basically self-publishing instead of having to rely on sort of conservative structures that you never have access to. That has definitely changed and revolutionized. Yeah.
And being globalization around democracy and women's rights and like all those things. Yeah, great things. Like proliferation of knowledge. Amazing.
Yes.
But there's unintended consequences that come along with progress. I mean, we can see that everywhere, right?
Yes.
And I think it's those unintended consequences that don't get enough time or thought. And again, the people who are driving the technology forward are not incentivized to think about that, nor are they often diverse.
Yes. Right. So there's a problem of representation and a problem of oversight, I guess. And the oversight is like, to me, it seems like it's at least 10 years behind.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, probably more than that. Yeah. I remember, so when I worked for Facebook, I remember I flew from, so I was on their community integrity team, which is like working to keep people safe. And so I had flown from London to the US, to San Francisco. And I think I was there for like an hour. Sorry, horrible for the environment. I know, so bad for the environment. But I was walking around the rooftop there. They have a green roof, and there's, of course, I mean, this was, geez Louise, 3 years ago, but it was all the little juice shots, so like ginger and cayenne and turmeric and blah, blah, blah. and there's like a juice bar, and there's, free everything, blah, blah, blah. And I remember calling my mom and being like, Mom, these people are literally just, and I was one of them. So these people are literally deciding what the entire world, 3 billion people, can see for news. And they are so unaware of what the rest of the world is like.
Yeah.
It was like being in a bubble, a utopian bubble. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is literally all of these people. And again, I was there, are deciding. They literally make the rules.
Yeah.
For what
we
can
get to
cannot
see.
be. Yes. And Google has very similar.
Yep.
And like, is that, I don't want to live in that world where the world is passively accepting what a small minority decides is right or wrong, and ultimately, I believe, is leading to intellect stagnation, to a total lack of health in so many facets, passive consumption with no critical thought.
And I was just about to say, this is a great segue into critical thinking, which you mentioned that you want to talk about. Like, are all our critical faculties dying? Is it getting worse, or is it same old?
So, I mean, I've only lived for 41 years, so I can't speak. I can't speak for
what happened before.
Well,
I'll give you my perspective, right? Like, I have a degree in philosophy, so I am trained to like the utmost in critical thinking and questioning everything. I definitely think it has changed in the sense that polarization has made critical thinking much harder, as in to express it and to have genuine discussions with people that we disagree with, maybe, and then find a sort of middle way, like a synthesis, right? It's just 100%. Everybody's like rolled in.
But if you think about, so this is, some people are going to disagree with me, and I know this is like a bit,
but that's the whole point. This is good. Like, people disagreeing with each other can be a good thing.
I believe if you think about, as someone who's in power, and again, not all of these are like conscious thoughts.
Yeah.
If you think about someone who's in power that wants to maintain power, because again, human nature, this is how we are. I want all these resources for myself.
Right. Which is another interesting thing. As people climb the social ladder, then they start to oftentimes push down the people below them. Right. Again, data. Yeah. Exactly. It sucks, but it happens.
True. And I do think there are some differences in how women, men, and different fluctuations on that scale approach things. Around like both gender identity, but also hormonal, etc. So if you were like, hey, I'm in power and I want to keep my power, and people are starting to kind of get up to my balance, I'm not sure about all these women, I'm not sure about these
what the hell?
What would you want to do? You'd want to keep them unhealthy, so you'd put a bunch of chemicals in their food. You'd want to keep them not moving. Another unhealthy is by sitting in front of a screen. You'd want to keep them away from each other, because actually having real physical dialogue and the way you behave online is not the same way you believe in 100%. You behave in person, or it's not. I mean, you can look at tons of studies about this. It's not. And you would probably want to keep them just angry in general.
Yeah.
And how
frustrated.
Would you do that? You would
Facebook.
And what are we doing? What are governments doing? They're keeping polarization. And so instead of actually thinking about, hey, maybe I should think about the system I'm living in.
Yeah.
Maybe I should think about the toxicity. I don't have my phone with me because I didn't want to be distracted. That I'm getting from this. I'm yelling at the person across from me, because then I can't yell at the actual system, and I can't actually make any change, because all I'm doing is spending my energy. I'm exhausted. I don't have any energy. And I'm spending my energy being angry at the person that I should actually work with to try to
change the system,
the structure and the system.
Yeah.
But what do we get into? We get into a passive consumption of content that aligns to what we already believe, because guess what?
Amplifies it
on the platform.
Yep.
That's what keeps us buying. That's what keeps us spending. We consume, whether it's clothing, food, content that's
Cat
passive,
movies. Yep.
And we're numbed. So we don't actually think. The book with my interns, like these are university students. That's what they're doing, the internship. And some of them said to me, wow, I've never thought about where these studies come from.
Oh my God.
I've never thought about where the information I'm getting is coming from.
Wow.
I forgot that I like to read.
Yeah, that too, right? People forget. Yeah.
And as an example, this is such a horrible example. I hate even giving it, but I had met with them all in person. And then I was like, okay, we're going to meet on Tuesdays in the afternoon, like 2:30, because that's when you don't have class. I'll come to near your class. We'll get together. We discuss the book in person. I buy them each coffee or beer, whatever they want. And we chat, right? So I'm like, I'll send you guys a invite. So I send the invite. I get 2 messages. One says, the invite says 4:30 a.m. Is this the time we're supposed to meet? I was like, your calendar's probably still on Mountain Standard Time. Then I get a screenshot where it says 6:30 a.m. EDT.
Oh.
No, sorry, 8:30 a.m. EDT. And they say to me, is this the time you want us to meet? Now, this has nothing to do with my ego, but I am the founder of the company. You are working for me. And and again, it doesn't matter. That is not the point. The point is,
can you think, right? The question is, can you figure this out on your own?
It says EDT in the picture you sent me. And again, I understand I'm not saying everyone has to be a genius. This has nothing to do with it. It's the taking the time to process and to critically think and to problem solve.
Yes.
And we've lost that. We've lost and I get it. I have ADHD. Sometimes I ask silly questions. It's not that. It's that, like, stopping and thinking before we send. Stopping and thinking when we're taking in something that, hey, you know what? This might not be right. What was the sample size in that study? What else have we looked at? What is an opposing view on this particular area?
What's the agenda of the person publishing this article? Right?
100%.
Yeah.
What's the structure? So, for instance, and again, I'm going to say something controversial. Horowitz, who is part of A to Z, A16Z, and as the precursor, I'm not a huge fan.
Okay, so people like Andreessen Horowitz, major investment company. If you've never heard of them, now you have.
Yes.
Shit ton of money.
I believe both white males in there, like something. Who've had at least Horowitz has had a tech company before, so he has like knowledge in the tech sector. So I'm, writes a letter in contrast to the dooms people about AI.
Yes, I've read the letter. Oh my God, we can link it in the show notes. You mean this sort of evangelical, we're all going to be saved by AI?
Okay, so let's take a second to think about what his ulterior motives are.
Yeah.
Shall we?
I wonder.
What's his background? What does he put money in? Billions of dollars, by the way. What's his incentive to keep on going and to make sure that nobody gives a crap and the AI goes everywhere?
Yes.
Oh, by the way, I think I just saw a post yesterday that said they're coming out with their own LLM.
Oh, what a surprise.
Equally, when Musk, so let's go to the other side, says we should pause for 6 months, let's take a thought about what Musk has.
Yes.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Musk is behind.
Yeah. He needs other people to press pause so he can catch up. Yeah.
100%. And guess what he's doing while writing this letter? Starting on his own company, LLMs, to get going faster.
So why do people keep getting away with this bullshit, do you think?
Because because they have power. They can drown out the other voices. There's not enough. I mean, if you look, so I'm starting this consortium, if you will, where we're calling it the black box.
Mm-hmm.
where we're starting to get people who actually look different into the conversation. Because
I love it.
if you look at the people who are having this conversation, I don't want to like, and again, I don't have anything against white men. My brother's a white man. My dad was a white man. My brother actually works in finance. So like, I love him to death. This is not we don't want all
Crusade
Ashleys in
against
the
white
room
men.
either.
No.
Yeah, it's not against white men. But if you look, it's again, we don't want all Ashleys. First of all, nobody would get an edge word, a word in.
Like and no Elsa's like one Elsa is like plenty. Like I would be horrified to have to work with someone like me all the time. It's a complete
Me
nightmare.
too. I'd be like, could you just shut up for a second? Like, for the love of God. And
no, but it's about equal representation, right?
exactly.
That's what
And
this
about
is about.
diverse backgrounds,
Yes.
people who look different, who face different things. But 90% of the people that are talking to each other or at each other all look the same.
Yeah. And have
And
very similar backgrounds, similar reference frames.
or capitalism or
Yep.
finance or whatever. Like, that is not the only view. The
So
people inviting
tell me about this Black Box initiative. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So what is it going to be? A kind of what is it? A community? Is it? Are you gonna like? Is it going to be a board of advisors to AI companies?
I'll tell you what the mission and vision are, and then I'll tell you our mission. It's really I want everyone to get back into the discussion and be intentional about where we're going as a society. I really feel like, especially with social media, but previously, we've passively accepted what's been pressed upon us instead of actively critically thinking about the implications of all of these things that are coming into our world. And again, it's not about being right or wrong. It's not about saying it's bad or it's good. It's about saying it's complicated and things are changing at a pace that is astronomical. We understand that. So let's intentionally direct where we go as a society, so that we're not passively taking the decisions of a few that didn't really take into account the multitudes.
Yes.
And so part of it is getting diverse voices into saying, what are the areas that this is going to impact? And I would say all. And what are the questions we really need to answer in those areas? And then how do we get people who are experts and who are knowledgeable in different spaces, not just from AI, but from all over, from psychology, philosophy, from education, from conflict, from law, economics, all of those. How do we get those diverse voices in a place where they can butt heads and they can have difficult conversations to try to answer those questions? And then how do we bring in everyone else into having their own discussions, debates, and understanding? So it starts at like the conversations where we're calling them black box conversations, where it's like closed door, where you can say what you want to say, but then there's a follow-up conversation where we're really bringing the kind of takeaways from those, and where people can then listen into those and be a part of those, and then proliferate those down where more and more people are starting to have the discussions, and then putting those recommendations, those insights back to the specific people that are either making policy, who are directing companies, who are creating organizations socially, who are saying, how do we set, what, as we think about like an economy of more time, right? How do we make sure that people are actually doing things that benefit them, society, and not just gluttony?
Or just consuming, right? Consumption. And it's so interesting. Like when you look at how unhappy people are, I mean, I have different theories, as in, I don't believe there's this whole plot sort of to make people ill by feeding them bad food and like all that kind of stuff. I just think that is too, like, people aren't like, and governments and companies aren't that good that they could sort of coordinate that kind of thing. I think it's just lots of things coming together, creating the perfect storm of creating very passive, consuming and very isolated, depressed humans. Right.
Exactly.
And we know so much about the science, what makes people depressed, sick, all the things. And yet on the flip side of that, so we're working very hard to make people healthy. On the flip side of that, we're working so hard to make them sick.
Exactly.
I mean, that in itself is mind-boggling and a bit
But we're,
frustrating, I have to say.
oh,
Yeah.
totally. But we're
Yeah.
working to make them happy in a way that behooves us.
Yes.
We're working to make them healthy and happy through consumption and through fast cures.
Yes.
We're not looking at actually, hey, we've been engineering our fruits and vegetables for mass production, and so that they don't die against bacteria or whatever infection. We haven't even thought about how they taste. We've been
Yeah.
optimizing towards consuming and towards
Is the
money.
ultra processed food, right? It's mental. Like, I am very lucky
Okay.
that I'm such a foodie, and so is my husband, and we've raised our daughter and also because of some other health related stuff, but we only eat food that we have actually made, including bread,
Oh, that's
right?
amazing. I
We
love
don't,
that.
I mean, there's some sauces, I guess, but like soy sauce and stuff, we don't actually
Yeah,
produce our own.
yeah.
But apart from that, we create our own food. And then when we eat something like outside, we're just always so shocked. And then we realize, like, this is what most people eat. It's just
Every time I go
insane.
back to the US, I get sick.
I I I
And I have
understand
a
that.
few
Yeah.
friends who have the same problem. Like every time they go, I had a horrible stomach ache. And I'm not eating fast food. That's not
Yeah.
like,
No, no, no.
that's
It's
not
all the
it's
hyper
coming.
processed, chemical treated, all
Yep.
that kind of
The
stuff.
oils,
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
insane. So, and then when you think about, like, yes, you can make a shit ton of money with with your open AI company, let's say, but then there's such
Yeah.
a massive price to pay when it comes to healthcare, right?
Yeah.
So all this capital goes into these businesses. All these people get less healthy, less happy, all the things. That is like an insane expense. And especially when you look at the demographic, right, with an aging population, not so fun. So definitely something we need to like think about and change 100%.
And loneliness, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's again, I mean, we saw that. Can't remember who I was reading. I do this a lot because I read like 20 things at the same time. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
was it
Same.
that or this? Or like, I don't know. But I read it. It wasn't my thought.
Yep.
I was reading, I was reading something where they were talking about, no, it was on a podcast. The woman was really, really cool woman too. I got to
It
look
will
her.
come
I'll
to
send it
you.
to you.
It will come to you.
Yeah, I will. I'll send you. I can't
And I'll
remember her
put it
name.
in show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. She was talking about how she had hoped that like during the pandemic, we would have learned, hey, we actually need to be together. We
We
need
need
this physical
human
touch
connection,
stuff.
right? We
Yeah,
crave it.
exactly. You can't actually get that through video. I mean, video is better than just like audio, but still we need to touch.
Yeah.
And sadly, we didn't really learn that. We just went back to the systems, right? We went back to the default. We went back to the quick fixes, right?
Yes.
And
Again,
so,
I would say because of how we're wired, right?
yes,
Like, this
no,
is
I
how we're
agree. I
wired.
agree.
Yeah.
But our systems incentivize us to quickly and through consumption, right, get those hits that aren't lasting the same lasting, right? And again, we can look at the actual effects and the perpetual effects
Yes.
of physical touch, of time together, of the energy. So even, she talks about this, of course, in how emotions are made, but like there's a lot of other science that show the energy or whatever you want to call it, that we pass between each other is different. Like that just doesn't happen through VR and AR. It doesn't, like, you actually need a lot of now there's somewhere, the breathing you can get through the video, but anyway, it's not the same. And the longevity of the effects is not the same either.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so interestingly, as we get lonely, we look for more of these. As we're not getting that, right? We look for more of the quick fixes, and then our brain becomes adapted and deficient and starts then looking for the more. I mean, I could, again, same thing with like the dopamine cycles, with the
Yep.
alcohol, with a lot, there's lots of things.
Shopping, whichever your preferred mode of like getting your dopamine is. Yeah.
Exactly. And you're right. That's how our brains are wired.
Yeah.
But we also don't need that as much if we do the things that give us more of that
Right.
equilibrium.
That deeply nurture us.
Exactly. Which nature is a huge part of that. Relationships are a huge part of that.
Art.
And I'm not saying, again, totally, exactly. Music, like,
yeah.
And it doesn't mean that everybody's brain works the same. That's not what we're saying, that there's not divergence in that.
We would never say that.
No, exactly. But there are things that we can, but that also means slowing down, being intentional, spending time in nature, getting away from consumption, getting away from devices, all of those things to actually be able to say, how do I feel? You know, what is
I was going to
the
say, and that ties back beautifully to the book, right? Because when you do that, then all the feels start coming up.
exactly. And
And
it
that,
takes time though.
yeah, but also that is not something everybody is equipped to deal with.
No, for sure. Oh, for sure.
Right. So that is another, like, we're
Sure.
constantly trying to avoid actually those emotions that come up when we stop, when we rest,
Definitely.
right? When
Definitely.
we sort of switch off. So I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be amazing. Like, this is my agenda, of course, but it'd be
Yeah.
amazing if they could start teaching this stuff in school, like emotional agility, emotional maturity. Like, emotions are part of what it means to be human.
But why can't we? Because we don't need to teach rote memorization anymore. We
Exactly.
have, there's no, like, we need to go. I think this is, again, this goes back to what we were talking about with critical thinking and a lot of these other things. The traditional structure of school, it's great that we're trying to educate everyone. Like, I don't want to go back to where only the, you know, the whoever the small percent of
Yeah.
wealthy,
The
and mostly men, right? Because
upper
women couldn't go
class.
to
Yeah.
school. Exactly. Are studying and having philosophical discussions or anything like that. That's not my point. But also educating in a way that's just about rote memorization and everyone has to be the same and sits and you know, it's certain. I mean, I first grade, I don't know if I told you this story. So I
Yeah. I
learned
have
how,
a school card. So that, like, right now we're there.
okay. So
So good.
I learned how to read really early. I was like 2.5 or so, right? And so in kindergarten, you were allowed to like run around. So, and I was in Montessori. So I was fine,
Yep.
right? No problem. Then I get to first grade and I don't sit still. I love to talk. I love to make jokes. It's just, you know, they're not always funny, but hey. And I'm reading chapter books and they're doing the alphabet. And so my teacher, bless her, I won't say her name because it was her like first or second year. She literally sat me in the corner and I would just read
Yeah.
because I was, otherwise I would talk too much. Guess why? Because I was bored out of my mind. So she'd put, and I knew, you know, it's great in math. So like, it was like, okay, go to the corner. You sit in the corner, Ashley, right? Which first of all tells you you're not like everybody else. You're
Exactly. Right.
weird, you know.
Segregate. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't know how to function in normal society.
Yeah. You're a
Anyway,
special child. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Which
Yes.
thank God my parents knew.
Yeah.
So they go to, you know, whatever the teacher parent conference. And of course, Ashley talks too much, blah, blah, blah. I got that for my whole life. I still get it. And my parents were like, well, you know, she's already, you know, she's been reading for years. Like, sounds like she's quarter. And the teacher goes, oh, don't worry. By the end of first grade, they all even out.
Oh my God. Yeah. This. Okay. So,
And
like, everybody listening to the podcast right now, like, yeah,
my parents were like, oh my God, we don't want her to even out. Like, what? You mean she's going to regress? She's going back to only knowing her alphabet? Like, what? And of course, both my parents are social workers. So of course they're also like feeling for these poor kids
of
who are
course.
behind and don't even know they're, you know, haven't had the haven't been read to, haven't had all this stuff, right? But they were just like, this is
No, no,
not
no.
good.
And this
Right?
is actually a great sort of moment to reflect upon. I'd love to hear your idea on this. There's always a massive discussion like, should gifted kids and gifted adults even get any help? Because they're so smart, right? Like, let's just focus on helping the people with different needs that aren't bright. I have opinions, but I'd love to hear yours.
So it's interesting because I wrote a post yesterday in response to this guy that was talking about super intelligent and like, how do we define it? And one of the things I explicitly remember as actually older, I think when I was tutoring someone or in high school or something, I explicitly remember learning for the first time that I got things so much faster than other people.
So
And that
realizing that.
there were things that other people would never grasp that that weren't hard for me.
Yeah.
Because I was raised that we're all equal. We all have an opportunity to like think and grow and love, and we're all valued, all children of God, which I still agree with. And I totally agree with that. And I do think that there's a huge amount of environmental factors that impact our ability
Yes.
to be like more intelligent than others, right? but I think we do a disservice to those who are naturally gifted, let's call them,
Yeah.
or intellectually on a different level.
I call
If
them
we
fast brained, right? To make it less sort of.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Who are naturally fast brained. If we don't also encourage that, we're also not allowing them to reach their potential, and potentially causing frustrations and
You can leave out the potentially, I think.
and causing frustrations and also isolation in the future.
Yep.
And one of the things that I really enjoyed now, and not everybody loves this as as someone who's fast brained, I do enjoy explaining things to people. So if we can find a way where I'm actually learning myself more, and they always say, like, if you teach it, you know it even more. Like, why could I not have sat next to a kid and read to that with them? Or what? Because I'm actually quite patient, and randomly enough, I do really well with I'm going to say intellectually disabled because I don't know the right term, but it's out of pure love.
Yeah.
Folks, because I am very, very patient. So, like, why couldn't you put me with someone? Why couldn't I explain maths? Because I love math and problem solving, right? Like, there's a balance between saying, like, let's help both, but not push either of them down or back, for lack of a better term. But education systems are not set up to do that.
How do you see the future of education when it comes to AI? I don't know if you've seen the Khan Academy founder TED talk on this. Like,
I have not seen the talk.
Okay, he was super excited. Like, and he said basically now everybody's getting a kind of personal tutor, and we can, like, people who can go faster can go faster. People want to go deeper can go deeper. Which, I mean, to me, would, for our types of brain, that's super fun. So from an educational perspective, that sounds amazing. What is sort of not here is, of course, a human connection again, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
So I was reading a piece yesterday from a PhD in physics, the same one that I was having a response to, and he had showed a chat that he had with ChatGPT about transformers or transistors, one of the two, I can't remember. And I, of course, was more interested in understanding the transistor, actually getting to see how ChatGPT worked. But I took a step back and looked at it. I think there's a lot of potential there once we obviously get rid of the errors on certain things, but not. I think there's a potential. We could cause potential frustration for people who learn better. Like me, I process through talking. So I mean, I love reading and I can but actually processing thought, I do much better talking through it. So sometimes I say things that I don't actually believe. It's because I'm processing them, right? And I'm like, oh, but what about this? What about that? Which sometimes gets me in trouble. It's not actually a belief. It's just me processing things. So like a learner like that, I already look crazy because I'm talking about to myself or the dog anyway, or someone else who actually really needs someone to physically show them something, or to have a tangible asset to really understand something.
Like, I love pictures, right? My brain just goes so much faster on pictures and diagrams and stuff.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of potential, but again, it needs to be cared for and directed, and we still need collaboration. And kind of, so I see it having a place, certainly, but not in the context where it completely removes us from education together, if that makes sense.
And also it'd be nice if there,
right?
And also if there was some oversight on the curriculum, that would also, I think, right?
For sure. And another thing I read was saying, like, if we can actually teach kids or teach people to ask better questions, is that what they really need to learn? And I do think asking questions is a part of it.
It's a superpower for sure. I would say, as a coach, right? And philosopher.
But also,
but it's not everything.
If we only have one answer as the answer, I don't think that also gets us to. We need to understand that answers are more complex than this is the answer. And that interface in chat is this is the answer. Explain it. Okay, here's the answer, but it's still not giving Joe and Juan and Juanita and Sherry and whoever. It's not showing the way they're answering it.
And also, like, the contextualness, right? Or I don't even know what the word is, contextuality, whatever you want to call it. Like, every answer, like, of course, like, it's not completely relative, but many answers change in different contexts.
Yeah. And
So
hey, this is what we knew before, but this is what we know now, and this is the progress of it. So just to like, that's a, historical context, but yeah. So I think there's a lot of great, again, there's tons of great potential. We just can't just throw it without thinking of all the other pieces that surround it.
So what would you say to people listening now and thinking, oh my God, what should I do? I mean, what would you love them to do if they're like, I want to do something or play a role in this sort of?
Well, I'd love for them to reach out. I want more opinions. I want more discussion. I want people to try to understand and have a thought around the implications and direct those implications
Yeah,
and become a part of collectively deciding where we go instead of just logging onto Facebook without knowing that signing up for Facebook is going to change our entire society down the road, right? So again, I mean, be a part of the discussion. There's
yeah,
so much going on right now in society and in the world, and of course there always has been, but there's so many things that feel to me, and I'm living in the middle of it obviously, just so really really foundational for how we move forward, and that needs everyone involved,
yeah.
no
I
matter
agree.
where you sit on the speed of thinking, on the neurodiversity, on the race, on the ethnicity, on the everybody has a
Yeah,
unique perspective to bring, and we need to bring those.
yeah. We need to bring all of it. So I guess it also includes gathering your own community and gathering people around you who maybe like AI, what's this AI thing? Sort of helping
Mhm.
them understand what is happening. Yeah,
Yeah, and bringing their voices too, right? And
yeah,
that again, I think that's what we want to do with the black box, and it's certainly what I feel as a person living at this time right now, it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm active in the direction, because I don't think I know now from social media, and I think we should all be able to look after COVID and act at the implications of social media and say like, whoa, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're directing where is the best for everyone and
yeah.
where we want society to head, not just the best for
The
five,
happy
10
few.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like the next card is money. So we already like touched upon money,
Yeah.
but like money personally. So a lot of smart people may be thinking, okay, I want to change careers or I want to start my own business, but money, right? Like, and I think many of them maybe even like withdraw from the whole money game and think, well, I hate money and I disapprove of it. And I'm not going to play, I'm going to be autonomous. And I'm like, I have a slightly different opinion, which again, people don't need to agree with, but I think money is power. And I think the more like, you know, good people, decent people have power, the better it is for everyone. So if
Yeah.
decent people think money is bad, that kind of perpetuates them not having power and influencing what's happening.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my take on it.
Totally. One of the things I realized because I felt like I was, especially when I was raising and like starting my company, etc. I felt like, gosh, I'm just pressing against the power structure. I'm pressing
Yeah.
against it, trying to change it. I'm trying to change it. I'm trying to change it. But unfortunately, we either need the entire masses to change it and kind of overtake that, or we have to become a part of the system, like
Right. Do you need to
that
like become
way.
a cog? Basically, yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to become someone who has the power to within change it, which is what a lot of these women have done, right?
Yeah.
They fought, they became in the power, and now they're changing the system.
Yes.
Um, and again,
And some amazing men too, by the way, who I happen to
exactly what I
know.
was going to say.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
not, I'm just saying from what I've seen,
Yeah.
there's again, yeah, my dad totally did that. And so I think I have a bit of a like cognitive dissonance there because yes, I mean, a part of it is like, okay, getting my startup, finishing it up and getting it out there and then having success with it so that I have that position where I can say, okay, I'm not, even though I have all these credentials and I've worked at these places, I'm not just speaking from not knowing, and here's the power that I have because I've done this, right? And yeah, you're right. In a system like capitalism, in a system like humanity, money is the symbol of power and
Exactly.
status.
Yeah.
And so if you want to play in that game, you have to be in that game,
Yeah.
and ultimately have an influence. And I mean, at the end of the day, like she talks about, and we all know from psychology, like money's a construct, right?
Yeah.
Money's
Totally.
basically like we said, a symbol of power. And so, but to change the structure, to influence it, you need to be in that discussion and in that game. I'm not saying you make that your focal point, and I'm not saying you keep the money that you earn or whatever it may be. You can give it away beyond what you're living in, which I'm a huge believer in. But until you have that to give power to others through giving it away, through your voice, through whatever it may be.
Yeah, starting new initiatives,
you're at a
et cetera.
disadvantage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think that's the, like, whether that's a fair structure is kind of neither here nor there. We exist in that structure right now. And so to influence that, now I would like to then influence that that's not the structure we exist in the future, right? But we do right now. So yeah, I think that's
work with the system rather than against it.
Yeah, work from within it too.
Yeah. And change it like the Trojan horse, right? Go in.
Exactly. I'm very bad at being quiet, though. Very bad at being quiet.
Change everything. So I'm just looking at the time. I wanted to add on, sort of end on something completely different. Yeah. Dogs.
Yay! They are just a gift. Yeah. I have two that are both adopted. One is just such a scaredy cat. Oh, ironic to call it a cat. And I don't think cats are that scared, but he's just so he has a lot of trauma.
Right.
He's a Mastiff and a German Shepherd mix.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, he's gorgeous. So if you, depending on what picture you use, I have one with him and me. It's like my one on LinkedIn and stuff. And one of his ears is always up. So it just gives him this sweet, endearing factor as well. And then the other I adopted when she was 8, and she's a beagle mix. And she used to be, we think, so they got cazadora, which is like a hunter. And she is just so feisty, but I really wanted to adopt an older dog because I feel like older dogs deserve love and stability just as much as the pupperonis do.
Yep.
And so she's just so funny because she's a beagle, so she's feisty, and stubborn. But it's good because I'm stubborn, so we're like, hey, who's in charge here? But she's also like a little
showdown
and so sweet. So yeah, I don't have children, but I have dogs, and I have to say I definitely have our emotions connect in our center, our body center, our energy, all of those things. I think they give so much. And I do believe that their balances, right? Just like they have that system of regulation and different things, and that we can sense those across the two of us. And so I love them. I don't think I could ever live without dogs again.
Yeah, so good. I love it. Okay, last card, community.
Ooh.
Who's your community? What do you consider?
So I think we might have talked about this when we chatted before. One of the things I had found challenging, depending on where I've lived, is finding people who are in the same, for lack of a better term, like headspace as I am. Not that I want everybody to think like me, but I do need people who can also be on that level.
You're human, right? You like to play.
Yeah. So I don't, that's not like a requirement, but one of the things that I've just starting to get here in Barcelona more and more of, because of after the pandemic, are folks who are kind of in that same, what's called intensity, passion area, fast speaking, etc. And so I've gotten that through kind of like friends of friends and just meeting a bunch of people, finding where people are excited. And then I'm really blessed to have a network of, in particular, women, but like a couple men too. I used to have only guy friends when I was younger. And now as I've gotten older, it's interesting. I've got much more like strong women, super switched on, as my one friend likes to say, across the globe. So I do video chats or like walking chats with them because I know them very well in person already. So it's like, we know we're on the same playing field with at least one of them every week and probably every other because they're like on the same like emotional, but also intellectual and like passion areas and stuff. So that's become kind of like that community side. And then, like I said, I have my parents who live 2 floors above me, and I have my church here as well in Barcelona. But I think it takes me longer I meet people really easily and I connect with people really easily, but it takes me longer to find people who are on the same emotional maturity and depth of emotion as well.
Yep.
From like whether it's having
Yeah,
trauma
the
or
intensity, all the
and the
things. Yeah.
intensity. Exactly. And the same intellectual curiosity and playing too. But once I find them, I tend to like want to connect them and get them
Yes,
into
and not let it go.
things.
And I love this, right? And I think we all need to sort of find those people and not let go, and sort of connect them and create this bigger community of people who like
Exactly.
to think about things, talk about things,
Yeah.
and change things.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, so I'm happy to connect if like people want to reach out on LinkedIn or
I'll leave your
yeah,
LinkedIn in the show notes. This was
love it.
amazing. I feel we could have talked, like, time just flew by and we could have talked like at least another 6 hours, but let's not do that today. Maybe
No, in person one of these days.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Ciao, ciao.
Take
Bye.
care.
You too.